Now it's time to start building what I think is probably the most challenging part of this project, and that's building this fence. Obviously I have one side built here, and I'm going to show you how it works, and then we'll build the other side and you'll see how it goes together. Now I'm using this Craig top track on the fence so that I can use some of their accessories like this production stock. And with this you can set it, lock it into place, lay your part in, cut it, lay another one in, cut it, and they'll all be the same. And I do that a lot when I'm doing projects. So that's going to be pretty neat. Now one cool thing about this side piece here, I don't know if you can see in the back, that fence has slots in it with these knobs. So if you're cutting a piece of stock that's really long, you can loosen these knobs up and that fence will slide way out there. I don't know exactly how far, but I mean, you could probably, using the stop, you've probably got a good, I don't know, 54, 55 inches that you can lay in there, and you can put something longer in there if you take the stop off. So I think that's a really neat aspect of this fence. Now on the bottom here is a support block. And what that's for is on the side of this cabinet that we just built, there are gussets that kind of fold out. And when this thing is in its extended upright position, that support block rests on that gusset. Now here again on the plans, they show the front and the back piece setting in a little bit along those side pieces. There again, I didn't see any reason to do that except the aggravation that it caused me, so I didn't do that. Mine are just flush. And if it gets to bother me, well, I'll put some edge banding or something on there and pretty it up. Now the side pieces are 4 inches tall and 13 inches long. And the front and the back pieces of this box are 4 inches tall and 25 inches long. And the support block is 5.5 inches tall with 45 miters put on the ends. And they're however wide you need it to be for that distance. I don't remember what that distance between the front and the back is, but however that works out, that's how they're cut. The tabletop is, let's see, it is 16 inches deep and 27.25 inches wide. Oh, one other thing is this tabletop sits flush with the sides. Now on this end, it overhangs, I don't know, I think it's about 3/4 inch. However much is left over is how much it overhangs. There again in the plans, they show using wood screws or drywall screws, just kind of joining the sides. I'm going to use pocket screws and glue, and I just think it makes a little stronger connection. So let's go ahead and get this box built and put the top on, then we'll come back and start working on this fence. Okay, so I got a bunch of pocket holes drilled in these pieces, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put some glue in the edges here, put it all together, pin it with an 18 gauge, clamp it, let it sit for a minute or two and some of the glue start to set up, then I'll run those pocket screws in. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, let's let that set up for a minute, and I'll go ahead and put the screws in it. Now what I'm going to do now is take this support block, and what this is 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood glued together. I already glued those up the other night. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it to the right length right here. And I'm going to measure in about 1 inch and take my square and put a mark for a 45, and then I'm just going to go cut 45s on each of these ends. I probably won't show you that, but so let me go ahead and get that done. I'll drill some pocket holes in here too, And I'll go ahead and put this in, then we'll be ready to put the top on. So let me go ahead and put a little glue on here, get started. I'm putting this right dead center in this box. Okay, I laid our top down, and here again, just like on all these other parts, I'm measuring in about 1 inch from each corner and taking my square and marking a 45 on that corner. What I'm going to do, I'm going to clip all 4 edges off at a 45. Now when you build this table, keep in mind that you don't build them both the same way. There's a left and a right. I've already built the left side. This is the right side. And the reason that that matters is because this inside edge is flush. This edge has an overhang. Well, you could say, well, if you mess it up, you can just flip it around. Well, you could, but here's the hang up with that. The front and the back has an overhang, and it's about 1.5 inches. But what I'm most concerned about is that the back would be dead on 1.5 inches. I want it to be perfect, and the reason is because the other side is dead on 1.5 inches. And why that matters is because this back edge is what that fence rides along. And I want it riding along just perfectly and corresponding to the other side that I built, so that when I go to mount these pieces, you know, I'm not going to have to start adjusting where the hinges go and all that kind of stuff. So that's why we're going to keep in mind left and right. Now it's not quite as important here, but now when you go to building the fence, if you get hinked up and build them both identical, then you got a problem, and I'll show you that in a minute. But for now, I'm going to flip this over and go ahead and get this top attached. Okay, I'm going to get it flush on this side. That looks pretty good. Now I've got my square set up. It's about 1.5 inches, but what's more important is it's dead on what that other piece is in the back. So, you know, as I go across the front here, I've got a little bit more, just a smidge more than 1.5 inches. But that's okay, I'm concerned about the back. And I go across the back, and it's dead on. So it's time to go ahead and start building this fence assembly right here. And there's really 4 components on this fence assembly. You got the fence itself. Here's the part for it. And that part is 2.5 inches tall and 33 inches wide. You have this end support right here. There's that part. And that one is 4 inches wide and 13 inches long. Then on the back, you have this little lip right here, and that's what runs along that box we just built. And there's that part. And this one is 33 inches long and 1.5 inches tall. And then finally you have this base. That's what this is. And that base is 6 1/4 by 33 inches. And this all goes together. There again, I don't know if you can see this, but I've got pocket holes holding all this together and a little bit of glue. Now, one of the more challenging aspects of building this fence is you have a couple of slots cut in it. And those slots are a 1/2 inch wide. When you lay this thing out, the way it works out is from the back end of this piece, of this base, from the back edge to that base to the edge of that slot is 3 1/8 inch. And you also have to lay out where those slots are falling. Now remember, you've got a left and a right, so you need to keep that in mind. Don't just cut 2 identical pieces or it'll be messed up. Now on the slot that's closest to the miter saw, this one right here, it starts from the edge and it goes in 3 1/4 inches. Now on the other end, that slot sets in 4 3/4 inches. So what that makes, this slot here is about 24 inches. And honestly, there's a little bit of guesswork in this, but it don't really matter. Now I cut these slots using my router table, and the way that I did that is I took my base and I laid everything out and I marked some lines where that slot's running. Then I took a 1/2 inch drill bit and drilled a hole just dead center right in the middle of where that slot's running. Then I set my router table up with a 1/2 inch straight cut bit. And what I did was I laid my piece, down on the router table, raised the bit up to the hole that I drilled, and then started running it. And I ran about 3 or 4 passes, just taking off a little bit at a time. So the good thing is I've already got the router table set up from where I cut this one. The only thing that I'm going to have to work out on this piece is exactly, since this is the other side, I need to work out where that slot's going to start and stop. So let me go ahead and mark that and get all that ready, and we'll go over to the router table and cut these slots. Okay, so I got some pocket holes drilled in my base, and I'm going to go ahead and start putting this thing together. And the first thing I'm going to put on is this little lip, and that's what catches and rides against that table we just built. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some glue on it, clamp it, and then just put some pocket screws in it. Okay, looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and put the fence on. Okay, let's get some screws in this thing. Okay, looks good. So here's our fence, and it turned out real nice. I'm real pleased with it. And what we have to do now is mount this Craig top track on here. And that way we can use some of their accessories, the stops and so on. Now, the way this stuff's made, it's made to lay over a piece of 3/4. And in the back, there's a, I don't know if you can see that little line that runs right down through there. You got to drill pilot holes, 1/8 inch pilot holes, so you can attach this. And that little line right there is kind of a drill guide. Now this track comes in 24-inch sections, but our fence is 33 inches. So we're going to have to cut it to fit. And yeah, I really am going to cut this with a table saw. So let me cut that, and drill these pilot holes and come back and we'll put this track on. Okay, so I got our track cut and drilled and everything like that, and I've got it laid up there. I've actually got it started. Craig supplies screws that goes with this, and really it's just a matter of kind of getting it lined up and holding it down tight and running them screws in. Okay, now all we have to do is put this table support on the end and we'll be done with this fence. Looks nice. Now you can kind of see how our fence is going to work. The last thing that we have to do on this thing is put this little support leg in on this side, and it just bumps up against that lip in the back and it's flush on the end, and it just sits right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue it and then run some wood screws up in it, and that'll hold it in place just fine. There we go. That looks nice. Now the fence is secured in the back through these slots with knobs and a 3-inch quarter 20 bolt. So what we got to do now is drill holes in the back of this tabletop. Now I'm going to drill undersized holes. I'm going to drill it with a 1364, and the reason is because I want this bolt to be really good and tight and snug when it comes up through the table. So what I'm going to end up having to do is actually take a ratchet and screw this thing up through there because the hole is smaller than the bolt. So I'm going to drill these holes dead center in that slot. And the way that these lay out, your first hole, if you're looking on the miter saw side of the table, the first hole comes in 1.25 inches. The next hole from here is 16 3/8. And the next hole from here is 8 inches. Now one thing that I've done on the bottom, I've blocked it in right there where them holes are going to go. And that's just going to give that screw more support and make it more stout and rigid when I run it up through the top of the table. So I'm going to take this over to the drill press and drill these holes. Where those holes are undersized, these bolts are in there so tight, you probably get to a point where you got to come around the top and take an old piece of scrap and take one of your knobs and just draw it on up through that hole. Okay, now we're ready to go ahead and put the rest of our fence assembly together. Just run those bolts through those slots. Now, take a couple of flat washers and a knob. Now one thing down here on this end, if you just put your washer on there and your knob, when you pull this out, that washer is going to flop down and you're going to have to fool with it all the time anytime you want to put your fence back in that position. So what you do is you take a little 5/16 compression spring, I don't know if you can see that, and just put that spring down over your bolt, then put your washer on it. And then while you just start your knob. And see, this way, whenever you loosen it up and run your fence out, well, that washer will stay up at the top so you can just put it back into place. So that kind of completes the assembly of this side fence, and I'm really glad because I'm tired of fooling with this. So now it's time to move on to something else. the most challenging part of this project, and that, what is that sound? Almighty. I think I drilled my pocket holes on the wrong side. That slot sets in, daggone it, you know, the two. Then I set my router table up. What I did, you know, the opposite, opposing. What I did, I don't know what I did. Got my fence all lined up, and that's not what I want to say. Through here, wrong side, nope. It was 8 inches from the second.